Good morning. All right. Let's see if we can get up to 1,000 viewers today. Good morning, good morning, good morning. People are funny. Good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host today, Shantae Charles. I'm laughing because I know that certain topics tend to get a lot more viewers in than others. But this is a very important topic, so I'm excited. I was out this morning doing the snow shoveling, so I got on a little bit of a casual attire here. So please bear with me. But it's good to be alive. It's good to see snow. It's good to feel the cold. It's good to be up and able to scrape off your car. So I always have to try to look at the bright side. So this morning, good morning. And I want to thank my lovely husband who cleared my car for me only for it to get re-snowed in by the time he was gone. So you might hear some noise outside, some screaming. That's all the children that are, I think they're sledding right now because school is out. So it's signs of life. So I don't ever complain about that. So good morning to those of you who are coming in. I will be right back. I forgot to get my drink, so I will be right back. Give me a moment. All right. Got to keep my regimen going of hot pineapple juice. So I hope that you all have something as well to drink as we're getting started today. Today we are back in Gary Thomas's book, The Sacred Search. And we started talking about what is your style of marriage. And we're going to start there today. And we're probably going to cover maybe one or two styles depending on the length of the reading. And then we're going to get into things I wish I'd known before I got married. And that's probably going to be the spicier section that we read today. And we're going to be talking about today, I wish I had known that mutual sexual fulfillment is not automatic. So somebody can hashtag not automatic. All right. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk a little bit about sex and sexual fulfillment. And I hope nobody gets offended by what we talk about because it's a necessary conversation. It's a part of your marital experience. So I'm going to treat the subject with as much responsibility as I can. So this is not a broadcast where, you know, I'm on trying to tell you how to be in your bedroom or anything like that. I know people do broadcasts like that. This is not that. All right. So don't be alarmed just yet. We're going to talk today first about what is your style in relationship, and then how will that affect your marriage. And we stopped by talking about the questions you need to ask yourself as you embark on your search for a vibrant soulmate. What will your ideal marriage look like? Will the two of you spend your lives sucking the life out of each other, or working hard to establish a business or a ministry and often spending evenings and weekends recovering? Will you seek to build a marriage or a family that is child-centered, focusing on your children? Or have you always thought about doing something like foreign travel, or maybe adopting one or two children and not having biological children? In other words, these are things that you need to be asking if you're in a serious relationship. All right. Many people assume their partner is looking for the same thing when they say being married, but that is rarely the case. We have an image in our mind of what our marriage will be like, but we don't usually label it or even express it. We just assume that the person that we're in relationship with shares our same views, and we should never assume, because everybody knows what assume makes. All right? We're not going to post it on this broadcast, but we know what assume makes. Two people who are both hungry don't necessarily want to eat at the same restaurant. Two people who want to get married are not necessarily seeking the same style of relationship. In fact, many people often aren't aware of what they want. They have unspoken, unnamed assumptions. Until you see marriage patterns listed, your wants may not even occur to you. So there are actually what they call marriage patterns, and you can kind of gauge and see where your ideas might fit in, so that as you are talking about this relationship and as you're becoming serious about the person you want to marry and you begin to get vulnerable with that person, you need to be having conversations about, what does marriage mean to you? What does it look like? What does the role of a husband look like to you? And what does the role of a wife look like to you? All right. Let's see. So let's read here what he says. Once you become serious about someone to marry, you and your potential spouse need to get vulnerable and be as honest as you can be as you explore this. The temptation will be to say what you think the other person wants to hear, but that's setting both of you up for considerable disappointment and even lifelong frustration. Lying about what you want out of marriage going in because you're afraid you'll lose the relationship if you're honest is one of the worst kinds of fraud you could ever commit. Listen, there are people headed for divorce court right now because somebody lied initially about what they wanted out of their marriage. Hello? You're asking someone to give his or her life over to a lie, and you'll eventually be found out. You can't sustain a lie for 50 years. You may worry about hurting the person's feelings if you begin to sense that the two of you are not cut out for each other, but be more concerned about hurting that person's life, their overall life. Don't serve your feelings by covering up the truth. Make your feelings serve you. We're going to look at many common marriage styles. There are many more styles, of course, but this list will get you thinking about the possibilities. Some of these, quite frankly, are terrible reasons to get married. So just because it's a marriage style, let me caution you that some of these, as he says, are not something that you should aspire to, okay? While others are morally neutral, a matter of preference more than values. You shouldn't get too serious with someone until you've carefully considered your own motivations and future desires, and also developed a somewhat objective understanding of what your partner is looking for. All right. So the best way to be objective here is to rank yourself independently from your partner, or you can do this as a single person so that you can be thinking about what kinds of styles interest you, what kind of styles are like, that is a definite no. All right. You need to be thinking about it. So here's a tool to help you understand some of the marriage styles. All right. So here's two of them that we're going to go over today. Let's do three. All right. Because there's quite a bit. I think he has like 8 or 9 here. So we'll do 3 of them today. The first one, if you're taking notes, the first one is a spiritual soul mate, SOLE. All right. Let's assume the best right at the start. Number 1, a spiritual soulmate is someone who is passionately committed to getting married for the glory of God first and foremost. Such people want to build a family that will model God's ministry of reconciliation to the world. They want to raise kids who will follow and serve God. They want to create a home that is a fortress for God's work on this earth. They want to partner with someone who will help them grow to become ever more like Christ. Seeking a spiritual soulmate above all else doesn't mean you don't have other motivations and additional marital styles. However, there's nothing wrong or contradictory with wanting to marry a spiritual soulmate first, but also wanting to enjoy an out-of-doors lifestyle or a companion who enjoys foreign travel. I'm hoping that the spiritual soulmate model will rule in Christians' hearts and that these other styles will become subsets. But I'm also realistic that spiritual maturity is something we grow into and that maturity brings evolving motivations. If you're already in a serious relationship, try to be honest and ask if your partner would truly pursue a spiritual soulmate marriage with someone else if you weren't part of the picture. In other words, does your partner really want this kind of spiritually intimate marriage? Or do they just want to be married to you and know you wouldn't have it any other way? Because there's the difference. And then ask yourself, is the spiritual soulmate model of marriage something you're willing to compromise on, something you feel only mildly interested in, or something you are passionately committed to? I can't tell you how many women have come to me with discouragement clouding their spirit and soul because they compromised on this and married spiritually anemic men when it mattered the most to them. They thought everything else going well in a relationship would make up for a lack of spiritual fervor. To a woman, everyone I've talked with has regretted making that compromise. So if you want a spiritually rich marriage, women, you must be ready to marry a spiritually alive and growing man. Hello. Blink, blink. So, for this woman, all right, what is he saying? Let me give you an example, all right? For the woman who goes crazy over an Idris Elba or an Idris Elba, right? She might go crazy over his exterior, but this woman who wants a spiritual soulmate may be highly disappointed if her Idris Elba doesn't pray, doesn't want to pray, doesn't want to read the Bible with her, doesn't know what consecration is, does not want to fast, doesn't believe in the concept of spiritual warfare. Like, that's going to be problematic. I don't care how good his shell looks. If your goal in marriage is to have someone who is spiritually compatible with you, all right, after a while, you're going to be looking at the shell and you're going to be like, that's a pretty shell, but what's inside? What is underneath, Lord Jesus? All right. So just keep that in mind. I was listening to a video last night. It's probably the funniest video I've heard from a man talking to men in at least a decade. I laughed until I cried because he was giving tips for men. He was talking to men and he was talking about what to look for and whether or not she was the one. And one of his tips happened to be that he doesn't go for what he called intercessory types or prayer leader types. Like for him, that was an issue, that the woman that he might have been attracted to liked to pray a lot. And I'm like, boy, that's wow. But there are some people that spirituality is not their first, that's not their first attraction. All right. And so he was saying that he wants a woman that is balanced, which I agree with. But then he turned around and said that most women or most prayer warriors or most intercessors that he's met are not balanced, which I thought was a very good observation from the male perspective, that if you are a woman of God and you are spiritual, all right, and you do have a relationship with God, make sure you are balanced. All right. So he was giving the example of a woman who is so spiritually minded that she doesn't know how to come out of that spiritual mindedness and simply enjoy her relationship. All right. And it was actually a really good point. He was being comical about it, but he was talking about that balance that people need to have. So yes, you want someone who is spiritually compatible with you, but you also want someone who's compatible with you in other areas. All right. So the first one he has is a spiritual soulmate. Number 2, for those of you taking notes, business buddies and romantic idealists. Business buddies and romantic idealists. After Prince Charles and the future Princess Diana announced their engagement, an interviewer asked Prince Charles if the couple was in love. Diana jumped in and answered for her future husband by saying, "Of course." Obviously flustered and taken aback, Charles added a famous addendum, "Whatever in love means." It was a painful moment and one that proved prophetic. It seems clear in hindsight that Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer were seeking two very different things in their relationship from the jump. My words added. Charles seemed to be looking for or seeking a good match for a future king. Lady Diana's pedigree, her youthful vitality seemed to fit those needs. Diana appeared to be seeking romance, fulfillment, and a storybook life. When the marriage began to unravel, Diana made it clear through various journalists that she felt betrayed, as she likely was. And of course, now we know that Prince Charles had been basically having an affair with his previous girlfriend their entire marriage. And then he went on to, after Lady Diana was killed, he went on to marry the woman that he had been seeing the whole time. That's a whole other side sermon. All right. So when the marriage unraveled, she made it clear that she felt betrayed. The earliest betrayal, however, might have been that from this early interview, it was clear that the two of them were looking for two very different things in their marriage. And that became the setup for major disappointment. Some people like Charles are looking for a life partner who is a good fit. Together, they can build a business, a family, a church, a name, or even rule a nation, as was the expected case in Prince Charles and Lady Diana. All right. They are not carried away by romantic notions or expectations. All that seems rather silly to them. They want a suitable partner for a satisfying and productive relationship. Such a pragmatic matching isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if one of the partners is looking for more romantic connection, there will be serious disillusionment when they marry someone who has a fairly utilitarian mindset. Some guys aren't very romantic, but they feel socially inadequate, and so they want to marry a woman who is skilled at relationships. Some women want to find a good father for their children. Some men might have high expectations that their wife will earn as much as they do. Romantic idealists like Diana expect to get much of their joy and fulfillment in life from a consistently intimate marriage. They have notions that they were incomplete before they met their true love, and they expect their true love to be their best friend, their constant lover, and work hard at keeping the romance alive. They realize the infatuation will fade, but they are committed to making the relationship the center of their life, perhaps after their relationship to God. Romantic idealists can be marked by clinginess, fear, sometimes jealousy, frequent feelings of feeling slighted, and even acts of desperation. All right. It's possible to be a mature and even secure person who has a romantic bent. All right. But the descriptions here are for the sake of those who actually go to extremes. They may be romantics, but they wind up on the extreme end. All right. Without critiquing who you think you should be, admit honestly who you are right now in your personality. For whatever reason, a romantic idealist's sense of security, self-worth, and happiness are directly tied with a very short leash to the current health, vibrancy, and intensity of the relationship. This intensity is exciting and invigorating, but can become exhausting afterward because they many times expect the level of intensity to be maintained or sustained. If you're a romantic idealist, you're going to become very disappointed when your partner focuses on their business or their hobby. If you're married to a romantic idealist and you're not one yourself, you may become exhausted with the demands placed on you emotionally, physically, and relationally. So, what are your expectations in this regard? What are you hoping to get out of this kind of marriage? Do you want to join yourself to a suitable partner? Or do you want to get lost in a wild, never-ending romance? Keep in mind, all right, if you think you're in between, just put a question mark next to that, all right, for those of you who are taking notes. The last one we're going to go over today is called the Adonis and the Aphrodite. The Adonis and the Aphrodite. This is a relationship based on sexual attraction and beauty. Let me take a sip. Can we just be 100 right here? A lot of the relationships that we see right now, Instagram-based relationships, are based on Adonis and Aphrodite. This is a relationship based on sexual attraction and beauty. They have good chemistry together. They look good together. In its crassest form, it's when you see the bodybuilder marry the petite woman who has had various cosmetic enhancements. I'm not trying to suggest that every coupling is superficial. Many times it might not be, but it helps to point out a potentially troublesome motivation. While physical attraction is a key component for marital satisfaction, if it becomes the main attraction, what are you going to do when your body ages? Because even people who have plastic surgery and multiple surgeries, etc., with probably the exception of maybe Cher, all right, your body still ages. Your body starts to age. Things start to sag. Wrinkles start to appear. All right. So if physical attraction is what is the main thing that's drawing you to a person, what are you going to do when their body ages? Are they going to be considered your starter husband or your starter wife? All right. To be fair, sometimes such attractions are due to lifestyle more than appearance. Healthy living, healthy eating, and fitness are noble values. Physical attraction as the main thing drawing the two of you together, even if it's through things like exercise and competition, is fine in your youth while you can enjoy regular exercise, joint trips to the health food store. But what happens if your health-loving spouse gets cancer? What happens if your spouse becomes incapacitated in some way, shape, or form? Mutual attraction is a shaky foundation because marriage has to do with, say it with me, growing old together. Somebody can hashtag that. Growing old together. Doesn't mean you have to look old and decrepit, but marriage is about growing old together. experiencing the process of time together more than it is about being young together. It is this person for whom age will increase. Is this a person for whom age will increase your devotion and your respect? Or will this person gradually lose what most draws you to them now? So if you're only drawn to their smooth skin and their tight abs, okay? And for the men, their voluptuous breasts. If you're only drawn to that, their firm butt, their, muscular thighs. If you're only drawn to that, then is this person gradually going to lose the attraction that draws you to them now? In other words, are you in this relationship largely because the sexual chemistry and attraction is so strong, or because you respect and honor this person and you feel that respect and honor for them deeper than skin? If you think your partner is most drawn to you because of your beauty or strength, the relationship is in a perilous place. Because the moment you start putting on some pounds, the moment you get some wrinkles, the moment they see cellulite, they just might take off running, okay? Beauty and strength serve a 10-year Hollywood career very well, but they're painfully short-lived servants of a 50-year, 60-year, 75-year relationship. All right? So those were the first 3 styles that we talked about today. Good morning. A spiritual soulmate, business buddies and romantic idealists, and Adonis and Aphrodite. Now, if you haven't already done so, I'm going to ask you to share this broadcast one more time in your networks, because we're about to go and we're about to talk about things that people wish they had known before they got married. All right. We are also just taking a station break here. We are also closing in on our 100th episode. And most of you know, if you've been watching, every quarter we've been doing giveaways. So episode 100 will be our final giveaway and close out for season 2. And then we're going to take a break for about a week. And then we'll be back to start season 3. All right. Season 3, we're going to pick back up in Kingdom Marriage. We stopped at a very good place. We are on chapter 7, resolutions. So you will see me pick this back up in season 3. All right. So remember, episode 100 is going to be giveaways. We've got some really nice giveaways this time. So I hope that you will join in on episode 100. All right. So Gary Chapman wrote this really awesome book that we've been going through. We have not hit all of the parts in this book. All right. But today's part that we're talking about of things that people wish they had known before they got married. And that is that mutual sexual fulfillment is not automatic. It's not automatic. I hope you guys shared this out again. All right. Because the things he's going to discuss are needed conversations. Especially if you plan on getting married. And if you are married, you can still learn something today. All right. So he says, this was another area of marriage in which I had never anticipated problems. I was fully male. She was fully female. We had a high level of sexual attraction for each other. What more could we need? I anticipated that this part of marriage was going to be heaven for both of us. After the wedding, I discovered that what is heavenly for one may be hell for the other. No one told me that males and females are different. To be sure, I knew the obvious physiological differences, but I knew almost nothing about female sexuality. I thought she would enjoy it as much as I did, that she would want to do it as often as I did, that what pleasured me would also pleasure her. I repeat, I knew almost nothing about female sexuality. Now, some of us know a little bit too much about sexuality, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. All right. I knew almost nothing about female sexuality, and I discovered that she knew little about male sexuality. Had I done any reading on the topic, I would have discovered that the ancient Hebrew scriptures were correct when they suggested that it would take 1 year for the newly married couple to learn how to have mutual satisfaction. And let me see if I can follow his footnote, because I remember that scripture. It was one of the scriptures I studied as I was preparing for marriage myself. Let me see. All right. Deuteronomy 24, verse 5. Deuteronomy 24, verse 5. And it talks about giving your marriage, basically, I think it was talking in the context of a soldier, that he really should have 1 year of marriage with his spouse before going off to serve. If my recollection serves me right, I don't have my Bible right directly in front of me today. But it's this notion of taking the first year to really enjoy your marriage without other people involved. I know it's almost countercultural now to the way that people do marriage. People spend a lot of time planning the wedding. They don't focus on their engagement process. They get married. They maybe have a weekend honeymoon or a week honeymoon. If you have a little bit more financially, some people have a 2-week honeymoon, and then they come back from that honeymoon and they kind of jump right back into engaging all their regular activities without taking that first year to really get to know, understand, love on, talk to their spouse without external voices. I know everybody can't do that in this day and age. Some people are going home from their honeymoon and they're living with their parents, right? So there are circumstances where everybody cannot follow this pattern. But if you can, I had several friends that in my age group and in my peer group, when we got married, people didn't see us a whole lot because we were trying to get to know our spouses. One friend of mine, she and my friend, both of them were my friends, but when they got married, they took it to an extreme. Like nobody saw them for their first year. Nobody. They literally took that year to themselves. All right. So he says here again, I have been blindsided by my lack of information. And this is why I'm always encouraging people that you don't have to wait until the person you're serious about is in your life. If they're not in your life yet, you can start studying now. You can start learning now. All right. But that was one of the things I saw in scripture. And I was like, they took a whole year off. I wonder why they would do that. Let me look into that a little bit more. All right. So he says, what I'm going to share with you in this chapter is what I wish I had known about sex before I got married. And I think he points out, I think I numbered them, about 7 things. All right. So we're going to roll through them. Number 1, first, I wish I had known that while men focus on intercourse, women focus on relationship. Men focus on intercourse. Women focus on relationship. If the relationship has been fractured by harsh words or irresponsible behavior, the female will find it very hard to be interested in sex. To her, sex is an intimate act and grows out of relationship. I know there's a culture forming. Okay, we call it hoe culture. Heaux. All right. That has this notion of women are just out here. They're just out here giving their body, and there's nothing to it. That's a lie from the pit of hell. All right. So don't buy into the illusion, young women, because sex is an intimate act and grows out of a relationship. Ironically, men often think that sexual intercourse will solve whatever relationship problems may exist. One wife said, "He speaks to me with intense anger. 30 minutes later, he says he is sorry and asks me if we can make love." Can I just say that for the gentlemen? It doesn't work that way. He says, "Let me show you how much I love you." He thinks that having sex will make everything right. "I can't have sex with a man who has verbally abused me." Let me say that again. Because they're telling you, they're helping everybody here. All right. "I can't have sex with a man who has verbally abused me." That's what she says. Why? Because those words are now tied to her emotions. You made her feel some kind of way. And now you got her feeling some kind of way. And you want to add entry into her soul and her spirit after you made her feel some kind of way. It's not good. It's not a good combination. All right? It's not a good combination. I don't have time to talk about all the reasons why it's not a good combination, but it really is not a good combination psychologically. You're now tying an act of intimacy to the emotion of abuse. All right? It's not going to be good for your marriage. For a husband to expect his wife to warm up to a sexual experience after there's been an altercation in their relationship is to expect the impossible. Sincere apologies and genuine forgiveness must precede the experience of making love. Another way of expressing this reality is that for women, sex begins in the kitchen, not in the bedroom. Matter of fact, next week, we're actually going to be looking at this book right here from Mr. Joe Hill that actually is entitled "Sex Begins in the Kitchen." And it's a manual for men. We're going to be reading from this next week. All right. Sex begins in the kitchen, not in the bedroom. If he speaks her love language in the kitchen, she is far more open to having sex when they reach the bedroom. If her love language, for example, is acts of service, then washing dishes and taking out the garbage may be a sexual turn-on for her. I remember the husband who said to me, "If I had known that taking out the garbage was sexy for my wife, I would have been taking out the garbage twice a day." No one ever told me that. Let me tell you, all right? Men working around the house is attractive, period. Ladies, if you agree, put some hearts on the screen. All right, I'm moving on. On the other hand, if words of affirmation is her love language, then complimenting her on a meal or how beautiful she looks will stir her desire to be sexually intimate. The same principle is true when whatever the love language of your spouse. While a husband may have a satisfying sexual experience with his wife, even when his love tank may not be full, the wife would find that extremely difficult. Number 2. So number 1, he said, men tend to focus on intercourse. Women tend to focus on relationship. You need to understand that before you get married. Number 2, I wish I had known that to the wife, foreplay is more important than the actual act of intercourse itself. Now, I'm going to put a caveat there because some women are just like, let's get to it. All right. But I think he's speaking in generalities here that foreplay is more important than the actual act of intercourse itself. While women like to simmer, men tend to reach the boiling point much faster. It is the tender touches and kisses of foreplay that bring her to the point of desiring intercourse. Now, he didn't write this next point, but I'm going to give it to you. Let me help you. Foreplay is not something you do the day of. Foreplay is not something that you do an hour before you want to intimately engage. I'm trying to help the brothers here who plan to be married. Foreplay is something you do all week. Not just at the time that you want it or some. All right. And not just the day that you want some. You're supposed to be foreplay all week. It's called wooing. It's actually really called the art of wooing. It's the things that you do leading up to the intimate point of intercourse. All right. So when you have been in foreplay mode all week, all right, then when you say, baby, let's, you might not finish baby, let's, because she might jump your bones. All right. Just trying to help you. Foreplay is not just something that you decide that you want to engage in a couple hours before, because he just gave you a tip. Women like to simmer. We like our senses to simmer. We like our thoughts about you to simmer. We like to think about how you have treated us. Not just on that day. All right. If the husband rushes to the finish line, she is left feeling, what was supposed to be so special about this? All right. What was supposed to be so special about this? Without sufficient foreplay, the wife will often feel violated. One wife said, I want to feel loved. All he is interested in is having intercourse. Slam, bam. Sometimes no thank you, ma'am. All right. And I thought about it when he began to give this analogy of the kitchen. I thought about it in terms of how we eat. All right. If you've ever been at a table with somebody and you've ever been having dinner, I don't know. Maybe I'm the only person who does this, but I observe how people eat. All right. Are you eating your food very slowly? Are you enjoying it? Are you savoring it? You know, or are you like, you know, how are you enjoying your meal? Okay. And why do I say this? Because generally, how people eat reveals a lot about their appetite. And it reveals a lot about their voraciousness at which they live life. All right. So a person who takes their time will take their time. And I'm going to leave it at that. All right. So one wife said, all he's interested in is having intercourse. He just dives right in, devours me, and he got sexually gratified and satisfied. But I'm over here looking like, what just happened? All right. And again, we're talking about mutual sexual fulfillment in marriage. You don't want your spouse, if you're a selfless person, you don't want your spouse feeling unfulfilled when they engage in sexual intimacy. All right. No self-respecting husband or wife wants that. Number 3, I'm moving on. Third, I wish I had known that I wish I had known that mutual sexual satisfaction does not require simultaneous climax. Now, it would be nice if every time you and your spouse engaged intimately, that both of you reach the climax at the same time. However, there are also people walking around who have never climaxed, and they're married, and they've been married for years, and they have never experienced that. He says, largely because of modern movies, many couples enter marriage with the idea that every time we have intercourse, we will simultaneously climax, and it will be heaven for both of us, because this idea and image in movies is, everybody's throwing off their clothes and throwing people up against walls and throwing them on beds and throwing them on kitchen tables. All right. And there's this wild passion, and they're engaging, and then they both have a climax together. All right. That's what movies have painted. But the reality is, all right, what is important is, the fact is, seldom do couples have a simultaneous climax or orgasm. What is important is that each of you experiences the pleasure of climax or orgasm. Such pleasure does not have to come simultaneously. In fact, many wives indicate that they much prefer to reach orgasm as a part of foreplay. When his stimulation of the female parts gives her pleasure of orgasm, she is now ready for him to complete the act of intercourse and experience the pleasure of climax. The unrealistic expectation of simultaneous climax has produced unnecessary anxiety for many couples. And so I'm going to tell y'all a funny story. I was at a bridal shower. This was years back. I was at a bridal shower, and they were having the female part of the discussion of the bridal shower. I've been to some wild bridal showers. But we were talking in this bridal shower, and people began to talk about this issue of orgasms and climaxes. And they began to talk about how, some of them were saying they hadn't experienced one yet and all this other stuff. And, so they were asking, going around the circle, asking, well, have you ever? And what did you do? And I was like, I have. And we pray. And everybody looked at me like it was the most insane thing that I had said, that we pray for us to have a good sexual experience. I'm like, y'all don't pray? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me you pray about everything else? Hello. Wait a minute. You pray about everything else. You pray about your health. You pray about your job. You pray about everything else. But you don't ask for the assistance of the power of the universe to come into your wedding. You don't pray? Honey. Listen. I said, listen, I have a fulfilling sexual life because we invite the Lord in. Hello, he the one created the union. He's the one that created my union. He's the one who knows what I like. So we invite him in, and we haven't had any problems in that realm. And of course, Everybody just, I mean, they fell out laughing. They just thought it was the most hilarious thing in the world. And I said, you laughing, but I got the orgasms. Case closed. All right. So after that conversation, I had several women after that came back and said, you know, we prayed last night and the Lord worked a wonder. I said, I know he did, because this is the God of the universe. You don't think he created sex? So if the God of the universe created it, clearly he can make it as mind-blowing as he wants to make it. He can make it as mind-blowing as he wants to make it. So let me encourage you, those of you who are married, okay, caveat there. Those of you who are married and you have never invited the Holy Spirit into your union, into your joining, I encourage you to do that. If you feel like you have come to a sexual stalemate, if you feel like you cannot climax, if you feel like you're having problems in the area of orgasm, in the area of erection, any of that, I'm challenging you to invite the Lord in and ask him to make your marriage experience what it is, what he designed and intended it to be. All right. So, number 4. Fourth, I wish I had known that when one forces a particular sexual act upon one's spouse, it ceases to be an act of love and becomes sexual abuse. There are a lot of people in the body of Christ right now struggling with number 4. I'm going to say it one more time. He said, I wish I had known that when one forces a particular sexual act upon one's spouse, it ceases to be an act of love and becomes sexual abuse. True love is always seeking to bring pleasure to the spouse. It is never demanding something that the spouse finds objectionable. If the two of you disagree on a particular kind of sexual expression, then it calls for communication and negotiation. If you cannot reach an agreement, then love respects the desire of the spouse who objects. To violate this principle is to sabotage mutual sexual fulfillment. And a lot of divorces are happening in the body of Christ because someone wants to practice oral sex and the other person does not. Someone wants to practice anal sex and the other person does not. Someone wants to invite 2 and 3 people into the bedroom and the other person did not sign up for that. Someone wants to watch porn while they're engaging in sexual acts with their spouse, and they were not doing that before they got married. They were not having conversations about their sexual inclinations, their sexual proclivities, their sexual desires before they got married. And now they're married and they're in the relationship and they're telling their spouse, this is what I want. This is how I want it done. This is what I want you to do to me. I'm sorry. You married a spouse, not a harlot. All right. So when you get into treating your spouse like a harlot, or when you release the spirit of whoredoms into your bedroom, okay, it ceases to be an act of love and it becomes sexual abuse towards your partner. All right. And so divorces are happening over this issue. But that's why it's important to be having these conversations before you get married. Before you get married, they need to know that you are Freaky Frida and Freaky Freddy. They need to know that. Do not be walking people down the altar, slipping a ring on their finger, and then you got a whole other different personality, sexual you, that you just hop out the closet on your spouse. Okay? That's fraudulent. Fifth, I got to keep rolling. Fifth, I wish I had known that sex is more than intercourse. By its very nature, sex is a bonding experience. It is the union of male and female in the most intimate way. It is not simply the joining of two bodies. This is why whole culture does not account for the soul fracturing that happens when you are continually giving your body over and over and over and over and over to different people. You're creating fractures within your soul. It's a bonding experience. It is the union of male and female in the most intimate way. It is not simply the joining of two bodies. Get this. It is the union of body, soul, and spirit. I think that is why the Christian faith and most other world religions reserve intercourse for marriage. Even people in the occult understand that sex is worship. It's a form of a spiritual bond. But we get over here in the faith and people seem like they can't understand that. All right? You're bonding something spiritually, not just your body. It is designed to be the unique bonding experience that unites a husband and wife in a lifelong intimate relationship. If intercourse is viewed only as a way to relieve sexual tension, which the world will tell you that, or to experience a moment of sexual pleasure, it ceases to reach its design purpose. Sex is about more than bodies bumping together. Thank you, Lady Stephanie. You're yoking something together. You're binding something together spiritually. You're binding your soul and emotions to another person. So if they cray, and you bind with them, guess what? All of a sudden, your emotions are out of whack. You were a stable person before, but now your emotions are all over the place. You're creating spiritual yokes and bonds. It even eventually, if you do not utilize sex for its intended purpose, it eventually becomes a mundane act of selfishness. So you got to think, am I in a relationship with somebody who's only an outer court person? Do they only want me for my body? Or are they ready to engage with me body, soul, and spirit? Because that's what happens in marriage. Marriage is a commitment to engage that person body, soul, and spirit. There are many people who are unhappily married because they married somebody who only wanted to engage them maybe in the body and the soul, but they don't want anything to do with their spirit. They only want anything to do with their spiritual life. All right. On the other hand, when intercourse is viewed as an act of love that expresses in the deepest possible way our commitment to each other, which is why the old vows that people used to say actually said, "With my body, I thee worship," it leads to mutual sexual fulfillment. All right. Sixth, I wish I had known that communication is the key that unlocks sexual fulfillment. In a culture that is saturated with explicit sex talk, I am constantly amazed at the couples who enter my counseling office who have never learned to talk about this part of their marriage. If they have tried to talk, it has often come across as condemnation or rejection. They have focused more on telling than they have on listening. The only way we can learn what is pleasurable or objectionable to the other is to listen as they choose to talk. None of us is a mind reader. That is why I've spent a great deal of my life encouraging couples to learn how to listen with empathy. Empathetic listening is listening with a view to discovering what the other person is thinking and feeling. If you guys will give me about 5 more minutes, I'll be completely done. What are their desires and frustrations? I've often encouraged young couples to ask this question once a month for the first 6 months of their marriage. The question being, what could I do or not do that would make the sexual part of the marriage better for you? Write down their answer and take it seriously. If you do this the first 6 months of the marriage, you will be on the road to finding mutual sexual fulfillment. Number 7, this is actually very important. I wish I had known that the past never remains in the past. In today's sexually open culture, many couples have been sexually active before marriage. Some people have experienced rape, molestation, all right? Different things that may have been traumatic concerning their sexual life or their sexual experience. The commonly held idea is that sexual experience before marriage better prepares you for marriage. All of the research indicates otherwise. In fact, the divorce rate among those who have had previous sexual experience is twice as high as those who have had no sexual experience before marriage. The reality is that previous sexual experience often becomes a psychological barrier in achieving sexual unity or oneness in marriage. Why? Because sex was never meant to be a comparison event. Can I say that again? Sex was never meant to be a comparison event. You were never supposed to have a roster by which you compare your spouse against, according to the original design. All right? And now because you have a sexual resume, now you want your queen to behave like a prostitute. That means you got to be renewed in the spirit of your mind. All right? Some people experience from trauma, they experience flashbacks during their sexual pairing. And so that may be something that the spouse may need to deal with. They need to be aware of that you've experienced, that if you have experienced trauma in your past, all right, and you may be working through it, you may feel like you're delivered from it, but there is a possibility that you may experience some traumatic flashbacks. That actually happened to me in the first couple years of my marriage because I experienced date rape. I experienced flashbacks. Had nothing to do with my spouse, but it was something that I had to work through. All right. So it's important that as you're having these conversations, that you're being open and transparent about what your particular history is. So 3 points. Lastly, sexual history, sexual status, sexual health. Be honest about them. Our culture has taught that sex before marriage is recreational and that once you get married, you can simply wipe the slate clean, commit yourself to be sexually faithful to your spouse, and all will go well. However, it is not that easy to wipe your psychological slate clean. So the less partners that you have that you've been engaging with, the better off for you and your spouse. Couples often struggle with the desire to know their spouse's sexual history, and when they know it, it sometimes becomes a memory that is difficult to erase. When it comes to marriage, something deep within the human psyche cries out for an exclusive relationship. It is far better to deal with past sexual experiences before marriage. When we are silent on this subject and enter marriage without discussing our past sexual activities or history, almost always the past has a way of erupting into the present. When this happens after marriage, the awareness of deception is often more difficult to overcome than the sexual activity itself. So what is the bottom line? Be honest and be transparent. But may I put a plug here? Be honest and be transparent. And don't be telling all of your sexual history to people you just met. All right? We're talking about serious relationships headed towards marriage. Just had to throw that in there. If knowing the truth about past sexual experiences does not help you find healing and acceptance before marriage, then my advice is to postpone the marriage while the two of you work through the issues with each other and perhaps with the help of a counselor. Ultimately, you cannot find healing and acceptance of the past, then in my opinion, you would be wise to cancel your plan to get married to this person. If you are struggling with this issue, I would encourage you to read The Invisible Bond: How to Break Free from Your Sexual Past, which will give you further help on how to process the past in a positive way. All right. So, people dealing with sexual history, know your sexual health, know your status. That includes STDs, communicable diseases, all of that stuff. Being sexually honest. If you're struggling with your sexual identity, all right, you're struggling with promiscuity, you're struggling with porn, those things need to be talked about and worked out before you marry someone. Here's another thing that's happening that I've been made aware of the last couple weeks. People are struggling in their sexual identity, and I'm talking to believers. You're struggling in your sexual identity, and you have not been honest with yourself about whether you're dealing with same-sex attraction or not. And you think that marrying someone is the answer to dealing with what you have not dealt with your sexual identity. So now people are marrying people. They know they're struggling with their sexual identity. Person marries you, and then they find out that you're bisexual, or they find out that you don't like men or women at all. And then you are having affairs within your marriage. This is happening. People, let's be sexually honest. If this is something you're struggling with, don't bring another person into your sexual identity confusion. All right? That's not fair to that person. All right? So I know the world has a term, about using people as your beard, saying that lesbians use men as their beard, and homosexuals use women as their beard to cover up what their real sexual inclinations are. But let's not do that. Let's just don't do that. Don't lie to people, because in this day and age, it will get you killed. And it is getting people killed in the church. It is very real. It is very real. So if you know you're struggling in your sexual identity, all right, allow God to minister to you and work with you. Get some counseling. All right. Be honest with the person. Hey, I know you like me, but I don't like you back. I don't like you in that way. I'm not attracted to you. Sexual honesty goes a long way. All right. Let's not use people to cover up what we have sexual inclinations for. Thank you all for the extra minutes. This has been another Daring Dialogue. I've been your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that I have said something today that was helpful. I hope I said it in a decent and tasteful way. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll be back and we'll be talking about theology again. We'll be back talking about the Gnostics. We'll be back talking about what has happened, what was happening in the early church, and why they began to have this separation and pull away. All right. So that's where we are. We're going to talk a little bit, I believe, about Constantine and what was happening to the early church and what brought about the divisions that brought us to the place where we are today. All right. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out and be light today. If you're in a snow-covered area, please be safe on the roads. Be safe driving if you have to go out today. And I hope that everybody has a great and wonderful day. If you felt like this broadcast is helpful, Please share this broadcast. I will try to post it. I believe it already posted my page, but I also try to share the YouTube as well for those who don't have Periscope. All right. Thank you again for your time and attention. Take care and God bless. Thank you again for your time and attention. Take care and God bless.